I think it's soon here. And I'm just going to share it out to a few places. And you can as well. That'd be great. The topic and title is Hurricanes Revolution this evening. So let me see. I was trying to share this out here. I'm not using the OBS software this evening because I don't feel like I still have a complete handle on how to fully use it properly. So still need to learn OBS. Not as clear cut and simple as I was hoping it to be. Not like a super tech guy, so yeah. Let's see. I'll try and share this out. Let's see. So, how's everyone doing out there tonight? I'm up here in DC, so I don't think we're going to get much, but I think we're going to get rain and a few thunderstorms here and there over the next 3 or 4 days, but yeah, probably more like 4 days, because it's going to go inland. They're talking about Hurricane Florence going inland, going up through like West Virginia and Tennessee. It looks like right now, the path that they're mapping out on the Weather Channel and whatnot. Let's share this out. One more place. Somebody join me. Hi, whoever that is. One person viewing. So the topic tonight is going to be hurricanes and revolution, and I'm going to talk about how hurricanes adversely impact really the poorer population and often communities of color, low-lying coastal areas. Take like the Hampton Roads area, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Hampton, those areas down in southeastern Virginia. They're very low-lying, and they're considered frontline communities in global climate change because, as we all know, the sea levels are gradually rising as the climate changes. So that is part of what I'm going to talk about tonight, and how revolutions really start from the working class and the poor folks most often. Certainly, I believe what's going to happen here in Los Estados Unidos. So there we go. Sure. So thank you for joining me. If you like my content, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can see the other videos listed there. I think I have 37 others, so this might be my 38th. Some are just like short little clips from different protests I've been at, and I will continue to do that to cover protests when I attend, clips from them, speakers, or just interesting shots from large crowds at different protests I've been at. Recently, series of protests that was really part of the campaign was the Poor People's Campaign, led by Reverend Barber, William Barber II, and Reverend Liz Theoharis, and several weeks up here on Capitol Hill, and it was great. I took part of that, and I risked arrest and was arrested one time in front of the Supreme Court building. And really, the Poor People's Campaign is led not just by William Barber and Reverend Liz Theoharis, but committees of each major city in the U.S. Led by poor folks. And so that's quite appropriate because it's called the Poor People's Campaign. And so what I'm talking about tonight is how hurricanes impact poor folks, vulnerable communities, frontline communities in the global climate change crisis facing us right now, and really has been facing us for quite a while now. And it's just that recently, in recent years, I would say maybe the last decade, we've gotten large mobilizations, usually on weekends, to try and confront this major, terrifying global crisis that we find ourselves in. But the frontline communities are often poor, and communities of color, as I was just saying, like the Hampton Roads area, Hampton, Virginia, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and southeastern Virginia. They're going to be getting a bit of a hurricane in that area with Hurricane Florence, but mainly it's going to be North Carolina, South Carolina coastlines, and there's a lot of poor folks throughout that region. And also what I'm going to talk about specifically tonight is going to be the two medium security prisons in South Carolina that are not being evacuated. They are McDougal Detention Center and Ridgeland Detention Center, and they're both directly in the line of the path of Florence, and clearly within the evacuation zone. So you have the governor of North Carolina and maybe not the governor of it is the governor of South Carolina now calling for evacuation of the entire coastal regions of their states. And, the inmates are not being evacuated because, of course, they're considered second-class citizens. What happened in Hurricane Katrina in 2005, there was the Orleans Parish prison that, at first the guards, COs and whatnot in the prison, at first said they would stay with the prisoners. But as a storm surge came up and water quickly rose, the sheriffs and COs all got the hell out of the prison and left all the inmates behind. So the inmates were basically, most of them were up to their chest in water mixed with sewage. And by the end of it, 517 of them were dead. I think most of them were their bodies were washed away. They were never found. So I'm going to read you some accounting of that report from what happened with the Orleans Parish prison during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Just to give you a feel for what it was like, what it must have been like for the inmates there. And again, we're talking about a country that has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the prison population. The huge increase in the prison population in this country coincided with the beginning of the war on drugs in the Nixon administration, Carter administration, Reagan administration, but then accelerated again during the Bill Clinton administration, and again accelerated again, even though Bill Clinton is thought of as this really progressive guy that was like great to the black community. The black community has always been overrepresented in the prison population. It's a lot easier for a white man to get acquitted, as we know, than a black man in this country. So let me read you some of the accounts from New Orleans prison that happened, because this is something the media is not touching on. You turn on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, you don't hear about McDougal medium security prison or Ridgeland medium security prison being right inside the evacuation zone, and none of the prisoners being evacuated. The ACL report describes a history of neglect at Orleans Parish Prison, one of the most dangerous and mismanaged jails in the country. This culture of neglect was evident in the days before Katrina, when the sheriff declared that the prisoners would remain where they belong. Despite the mayor's decision to declare the city's first ever mandatory evacuation, OPP even accepted prisoners, including juveniles as young as 10 from other facilities to ride out the storm. As floodwaters rose in the OPP buildings, power was lost and entire buildings were plunged into darkness. Deputies left their posts wholesale, leaving behind prisoners in locked cells, some standing in sewage-tainted water up to their chests. The sheriff's office was completely unprepared for the storm, said Tom Jewett, a litigation fellow for the National Prison Project. The Louisiana Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals did more for its 263 stray pets than the sheriff did for the more than 6,500 men, women, and children left in his care, end quote. Prisoners went days without food, water, and ventilation, and deputies admit that they received no emergency training and were entirely unaware of any evacuation plan. Even some prison guards were left locked in at their posts to fend for themselves, unable to provide assistance to prisoners in need. The prisoners were finally evacuated by order of the state after days of fear and chaos. The report follows the prisoners as they were transferred to jails and prisons around Louisiana. Thousands of the men were first transported to the Elaine Hunt Correctional Center, where they were placed outdoors in a yard with inadequate food, medical care, and protection from other prisoners, many of whom were armed with makeshift weapons. According to the report, several other facilities, prisoners were subject to systematic abuse and racially motivated assaults by prison guards. Quote, some prisoners at Hunt attacked other prisoners, and guards did nothing to prevent this from happening, said Katie Schwartzman, a staff attorney for the ACLU of Louisiana. Quote, guards threatened prisoners with guns when they were approached for help and shot at one prisoner who had been stabbed by a group of other prisoners. So it goes on and talks about a few different individual cases. Oh, wow, here's one. Ashley George, a 13-year-old girl housed in OPP's youth center who was moved to an area adjacent to an adult male holding area where the men watched her use the toilet. As the building began to flood, Ashley spent days in water up to her neck. Adult prisoners rescued Ashley and the other children from the waters. After being taken to the bridge for evacuation, Ashley was lucky enough to be given a bag of potato chips and water. She reports again being forced to relieve herself publicly and that pregnant girls received no assistance or treatment. So, doesn't matter how young they are, that's how we treat our prisoners in this country. Complete second-class citizens. And of course, we know that prison labor is commonly referred to as slave labor because they don't really get paid anything for the often grueling work they do during their incarceration. But that's what we have. We have that going on in South Carolina now, as these prisoners, I believe between the two prisons that I cited, more than 700 inmates are going to be subjected to the full brunt of Florence and the storm surge that will begin probably tonight, I believe, into the morning. The initial storm surge that comes up, which is a very rapid influx of water from the ocean up into the bays and freshwater rivers that go inland, become flooded very quickly. So like I said, there's a lot of poor communities along the low-lying areas, and sort of a subtext of these interviews that you see being done on ABC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, so forth, so on. They interview the people that are being left behind, and the interviewers kind of got this tone in their voice like, why wouldn't you evacuate? And at first, I must admit, I was kind of like, okay, what's wrong with these people? They need to evacuate. in a couple interviews I've seen now, the person being interviewed doesn't really give a full explanation right away, but after a couple probing questions, they often say, well, I don't have money to put in my car, or my vehicle just won't go very far. Some you kind of guess, they don't spell it out themselves, they don't even have a vehicle to go anywhere. So again, the poor are being left behind in the wake of this hurricane. And further along that line, what's happening in the news right now is this whole brouhaha about President Shithead talking about Maria and saying, oh, we handled Maria in Puerto Rico pretty well. It was actually an unsung success. Meanwhile, pictures of photographs of, I think, like 38 million gallons of water, bottled water, are still there on pallets in the middle of a runway in Puerto Rico with tarp over it and whatnot. So they were never distributed to the population. These are, like something like 38 million. I'm doing a search here. Let me see if I can bring up that photograph of the water. Yeah, and undrinkable water was actually, Trump is saying, oh, there weren't 3,000 people that died. Well, there's actually some agencies said the death toll in Puerto Rico was actually closer to 4,000. So, of course, Puerto Rico is overwhelmingly an island of color and not exactly rich. So, again, at the time, it was pretty clear that President Trump didn't really even see Puerto Rico as part of the U.S. In addition, he doesn't really care that much about communities of color. So, undrinking water causes diseases such as cholera, dysentery, typhoid, E. coli, and so forth, things you can easily die from. So let's see where that photograph, oh, here it is. Let me see, I'll turn around my, this is the, something like 38 million gallons of water there on a runway in just outside of San Juan, Puerto Rico. See that? Pretty huge. Those are all gallons of water that were never distributed to the population. But Trump is now saying it was this unsung success. So really, revolution comes about when the government is no longer serving the needs of the people. Now, ideally, that's what government is supposed to do. It's supposed to serve the populace, and our government is not. Our government is serving the elites, the super rich people that are given tax break after tax break after tax break, that are already making billions of dollars. The Waltons, Jeff Bezos. That's who government is now serving. Government is not serving the people that really need the assistance. The people in Puerto Rico that are confronted by a hurricane. Now we have reports of Trump diverting, President asshole, shithead, take your choice, diverting $10 million from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, into ICE. That. I'm going to see if he's in violation of a law with that. I'm going to do a little more research. But, taking $10 million from FEMA, which helps the directly impacted communities, and transferring to ICE, therefore further terrorizing the immigrant community in our country. So that's how revolution starts. Government is no longer serving the interests of the middle class, the poor, the working poor, so forth, so on. I think there's been some prison strikes, pretty major prison strikes recently. So I really think that the prison population will be part of the forthcoming revolution as well. And any of us that are serious about revolution need to respect the prison population and what they've had to suffer and endure. Most folks, even when they get out of prison, they're marked for life as second-class citizens. In many states, they still, if you have a felony conviction, you still cannot vote. I think that's more than 20. It might be like 23 states. You permanently cannot vote ever if you had even one felony conviction. So that's how revolution starts, is the alienation, but really the oppression from the working class, poor folks, marginalized communities like communities of color, certainly the prison population. That discrimination, that abuse, that systematic oppression, that's what can lead to a revolution easily, and I think it will be that way forthcoming revolution here in the US. So yeah, I hope you've shared this out. If you like my content, please go ahead and subscribe. I was going to end with something here. I'm going to read a little bit Langston Hughes here to end this live stream. The great African-American poet Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore, and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over, like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So there we go, folks. Glad I could join you this evening, talk about hurricanes and revolutions. Peace out. Bye-bye.